Okay, it is 6 p.m. and we will call to order the regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission on Thursday, November 15th, 6 p.m. Larry, would you do the roll call, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Prow.
Here.
Commissioner Simmons.
Here.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Here.
Vice Chair Frost.
Here.
And Chairman Pranzo is absent. Our council liaison, Hawkins, is also present. Mr. Vice Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And if everyone would please rise, Commissioner Schmidt will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, next item of business is discussion/approval, disapproval of the minutes of the regular meeting conducted on October 18th. Commissioners, any comments, questions, or anything that you see there in the minutes?
I would move that we accept the minutes of October 18th as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt and a second by Commissioner Simmons to approve the minutes as noted. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes pass. New business, we have no new business on our agenda, so we will go to old business. First item is review, discussion, possible action of the proposed draft text amendments to Development Code Part 7 dealing with parking, loading, and unloading. Okay, any presentation on this?
Very brief one, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Commission. Actually, I'll do a presentation that puts items A and B together in a single presentation, and then we have it set up for you to take two different individual actions. We've held work studies with you in the past regarding the parking code and with the sign code regulations, trying to become more current, update, recognize new technologies, address certain recent court rulings, things of that nature. Those work sessions have been pretty comprehensive, and we continue to work on upgrading the drafts as have been presented and you have reviewed. I think we've incorporated the majority of your comments. We're still tweaking a few things. We're still fine-tuning illustrations that would be contained in those final documents when they move forward. But in the interest of not really expediting this, but keeping the process moving forward, what we're looking for tonight, unless you have specific items you want to address in those drafts, what we're looking for tonight is just direction to go ahead and proceed with the citizen review process as prescribed by the development code. We are looking at tentatively actually holding a citizen review public meeting in early December, and then moving forward from the results of that with any addressing any questions, concerns, things of that nature, bringing them back to the commission, and possibly going right into a public hearing process. So we're looking at possible adoption as early as February of 2019 on both of these codes through the council process also. So Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the commission, it's your pleasure on how you would like to handle this. If you wanted to address any more questions or not tonight, we do have our consultant, Dana Burkhart, here to answer those. And otherwise, it's just motion to proceed with citizen review.
Thank you, and I see that you have been kind to us in providing some motion language, so that's much appreciated.
Sir.
I do have a few comments as we go through, so I don't know if the other commissioners have comments as well, but we can just go through, just run through real quickly page by page and just make sure that everything looks okay. So on the first page, under gross floor area, the last line there says dimensions of all the buildings, 4 levels except attics. Attics seem to be kind of a neat area these days where people are calling them that and using them for different things. So I wondered if we just need to put in parenthesis after attics, non-habitable, like we did to clarify below with another, just to make sure that our interpretation and the other people's are the same.
Maybe just call it except non-habitable attics.
Yeah, I just wondered if we needed a little clarification there. Any other comments on page 1? Page 2. Down near the bottom of the page, subsection J. I just added "and attendant landscaping" to that too, so that if someone looked at that, they'll understand that the maintenance is not just the parking, but it's the landscaping as well. Everybody okay else on number 2? Page 2? Page 3. Subsection D in the middle of the page, access. There's in red there, that second part says, the whole sentence reads, if only a single ingress and egress lane, then 32 feet is required. And I thought that's kind of what was covered in the first part, where it says the minimum width of driveways shall be 40 feet if ingress and egress are the same, and include a separate right and left turn egress. But then I got confused when I read that second one. So.
Now, the second portion of that, for the 32 feet, that's only if there's a single point of egress. And you notice in some parking lots, there'll be a right and left turn lane of egress from the site. Or, right-hand turn and left-hand turn. In other words, they're isolated turn movements. If you're just going to have a single lane of ingress, then we reduce that by the 8 feet and are proposing 32-foot maximum width.
So the 32, just to repeat that back to make sure I'm getting this, if it's a situation where we have a single egress going out, no ingress coming in at that location, but there's a left-hand turn and a right-hand turn going out?
No, it would still be an ingress. You would still have a single lane of ingress in both cases. So one would be 3 lanes wide and the other would be 2 lanes wide.
Okay. Maybe you better just...
Illustration?
Or something. Or just polish up the language, because I read it 3 times, thought I figured out what it meant, and I figured I better ask because So, yeah, just work on the language a little bit. Anything else? Page 3, gentlemen? Okay. Page 4. Under section Roman numeral 5, part A, parking space location. That's the one where I sent a request to just see a diagram or something on this one. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we've been beating that up for a while this afternoon too, and quite frankly, the more we look at it, the more confused we're getting also.
Okay.
We're not sure where that language and thought process came from originally, so we're going to reevaluate that entire subsection A. See if it's even needed. If it is, if we feel it was intended to be basically a site visibility triangle, then we'll address it accordingly.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I read that 3 or 4 different ways and backwards, and I still couldn't figure it out. So I'm glad I was not the only one confused about this one. And down under Roman numeral 6, subsection B, in the middle of the section there, in the red writing, it says parking spaces exceeding 20% of the minimum required may be approved. And I'm just doing the math here and thinking, okay, if the minimum required is 100 and 20% of that is 20, so 20% of the minimum is 20. Should that say 120%?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just doing the math in
The
my
intent
head.
was that you could go up to 120 spaces without any additional
Right.
permission. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We
I
can
think
clarify.
I think it would read better to say 120%. And then part D there, where it talks about reciprocal access, my only concern there is this says, if it's required, what if we have an existing commercial use that's been there for years and years and their parking is all set up and we've got a new one that comes in beside them? and we have reciprocal access is required, then one of them is going to lose parking spaces and be required to do some improvements to make reciprocal access. So I'm just wondering, a new abutting to existing with this requirement.
Well, the intent here is actually to provide shared parking as well as ingress, egress from a property. Sometimes one development might be island a little bit. This is more having to do with like the Safeway Center out at Anthem, where all the different businesses, actually a lot of them own their space, but yet they drive through common drives and things of that nature. That was the intent on this.
Yeah, I figured that was the intent, but I just thought about if this ever came up where we had an existing use and a new use come in, and the new use wanted access through there, and he pointed to this and said, it's required, so make the Safeway Center provide access into my development as well, so we have reciprocal access. So I'm just bringing that up as a question mark.
Maybe we just word it more as put a qualifier, if desired by both parties, for reciprocal access, then an agreement is required or something like that. Yeah, this is existing language that
Okay.
we've inherited, but I see your point.
And then in Part E there, it talks about the landscape islands in the parking areas to be in the green lettering, a minimum of 3 feet in total width. And this is just a concern back to operations when you put mesquite trees and some of these other trees that are desert adapted in a 3-foot space. After they start getting bigger, then they start heaving everything around them. So I'm wondering if 3 feet is sufficient with some of these desert adapted plants that we put in there with their root balls when they start growing and start heaving asphalt and curb and gutter.
Personally, I'd rather see 10 feet in those areas, but that's been problematic getting approved in other jurisdictions. If that's something you'd like to proceed with, that would be fine with staff. Usually we get the most pushback from the developers themselves,
Yeah.
which isn't our problem, I know.
And I figured that was the case. I see if they're on the end of the parking area, then it's 5 feet.
Right.
Wonder if we should just say everything's 5 feet. And again, I guess I shouldn't be concerned, because if it happens, then it's going to be the private entity's problem to go fix it, not public funds. But
A lot of jurisdictions actually have 10 feet on the end as well as intermittently across a parking aisle, but it wouldn't necessarily be an island that went through a double bank of spaces. In other words, it wouldn't be a 40-foot long island. It would be intermittent, 10 by 20s, things like that. So 5 foot would be, if you wish to go that way, or we can go 10 feet on the ends and 5 feet in the internal, things of that nature.
I'm just raising it because of experience in the past, and I'll let you experts cogitate on that one. I'll go with whatever you think is right.
Okay.
And then on the, any other comments on page 4? Page 5, very top there. Parking areas to provide shade. I know right now that heat island, the effects of heat islands are a big thing, and does the town have any requirements for, if we say provide shade, but should we have a requirement that says there'll be 10% canopy at maturity of the tree, there'll be 15%, there'll be some sort of a shade requirement?
We don't have one currently, no. That's not an unusual requirement to place in a parking or landscape code.
I personally would like to see that as part of this. There's some sort of a shade requirement. If we're going to ask for shade, let's put a requirement in there so that we kind of get what we're looking for and get the look that we're looking for.
Are you comfortable with a 10% canopy?
Well, I'll defer to the experts as to what's common
homework
around the valley with our
Right.
sister cities.
Question, with our parking lot back off of Main Street, we got that large parking lot with the restroom back there. Now, are we gonna have to be putting in, are we talking shade trees or canopy?
Well, it could be mesquite, palo verde. It'd still be, something that would be, drought tolerant and things. And this code, basically, for those types of things, are going to be for major modifications to existing facilities or new construction. It is not retroactive. That would be considered non-conforming.
Not necessarily the
Right.
parking lot that we already have.
Right.
Right.
Got it.
And then just a little further down under section I, or no, what is that down there? It used to be alternative design standards.
Right. It is now I.
I started doing the math there, where it talks about midway through there, number of parking spaces be increased by no more than 50% above the base maximum, and referring back to Roman numeral section 6, subsection B, that says the max is the minimum plus 20% allowable. So this is going to say that plus another 40%. So I just threw some numbers at it to make the math easy. So if 100% was the minimum, we gave them another 20%, that jumped to 120. And we gave them another 40%, that jumps our total parking spaces to 168 when our minimum or the standard required was 100. And I just wanted to ask just a question. Did we mean that 100 space parking area could increase by 68?
That's interesting. This is, again, existing language, and I didn't really sit down and do the math. It sounds to me like it probably was meant to be above the base minimum allowed,
Okay, so
which would mean 140.
140, yeah, so just clarify that. When I did the math, it made me scratch my head a little bit.
The other way to attack this, too, is an increase over the 120% would have to be substantiated through some qualified expertise, such as the ULI. That's usually the typical one, the Urban Land Institute standards for parking. There are certain business types and business models that they want as much parking there as possible, and so that's what you end up with, is a sea of parking with, that isn't necessarily, it's only going to be used twice a year.
Right.
The day after Thanksgiving and the day after Christmas was when it maxes. So, we can look at it that way too and look at the ULI standards, but it probably was meant to be 40% over the minimum base standard.
Well, I'll leave that one in your hands. And anything else on?
I have one thing that just jumped out at me. Under I, we have a subsection 3 that has no text in it. But the subsection hasn't been crossed out.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Page 6. Page 7. One comment down near the bottom where it talks about mobile homes, one per dwelling unit. I only bring this up because the face of mobile homes have changed to these modular buildings that are brought in on wheels, but then the wheels are removed. Where does a building like that fall in this? Because some of those are bumping 2,000, 2,500 square feet now.
And this is kind of a standard that was already existing. And first of all, that just dawned on me that the word mobile home, we need to get rid of mobile. Actually, mobile homes are no longer permitted in the town of Florence.
Should be
Nor are they
manufactured.
permitted most anywhere, because that's based on a unit that was manufactured before June 15th, 1976, to no building standards. Manufactured homes, as we know them today, are built under HUD standards. Modular homes are built under IBC standards. And so, and you're correct that they are getting larger, and so that could easily be changed to 2, just like a single-family home would be addressed.
That was my thought, so I'll just leave the manipulation of the language and that to you then to make that correct. Page 8. Page 9.
Just make you stand.
Had one comment under subsection A, handicapped parking. Should act in the second line there be capitalized there towards the end of the sentence, since it refers back to the Americans with Disabilities Act?
Probably so, yes.
And then under section 1, second line there, minimum of 1 van accessible handicap parking space and the minimum required accessible parking spaces as prescribed. It almost sounds like we're going to have 1 accessible plus the number prescribed. Should it say instead 1 accessible handicap parking space in the minimum required, so that we make sure that one of those required is van accessible? Is that what the intent of this is?
But basically, there are areas depending on the quantities of parking, that you would have to provide 3, 4, 5 handicap accessible spaces. Of those, one has to be van accessible.
It's just when the word "and" is used, it sounds like we're going to have a van accessible and all of those required. So that's one extra than required.
Would it be the van accessible in addition to the required, or would it be a van accessible
Could be the
within
one,
that required?
yeah. Basically, it maybe should say of the minimum required accessible spaces.
So I changed "and" to "in," but I don't know if that works.
We'll look it over.
Okay. Anything else on 9? Okay, page 10. Page 11. Under H, about a third of the way down. I got to look at my... Bear with me for just a second here. My note is too cryptic for me to figure out what it is. Anyway. Oh, okay. Well, if you look back in section Roman numeral 4, C2, you refer to a nice little reference in there. It says refer to section 150.090 for additional parking area lighting requirements. And I'm just wondering if we should add that same note to this, just to provide that reference for people who would be reading this. I thought it was a good addition.
Oh, okay.
And then down in J, is there a requirement on that when it says proposed changes that they're going to furnish a report identifying the required number? Is that based on ULI or what's that based on?
As far as the number of off-street parking, that would be based on this code. For example, if you had a warehouse use converted to a retail use, that means that there's going to be an increase in the parking requirement.
But in part J there, it says proposed changes of use or enlargement of a site or structure shall be required to furnish a report identifying the required number of off-street loading berths with a site plan design review application. What are you going to judge that report based on ULI or?
No, we base it on this code.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, and maybe it should say a calculation instead of a report. But like I said, let's say you had a warehouse that required one space per 1,000 square feet, and you wanted to convert a chunk of it to retail. Now you need to have one space per 200 square feet.
Okay.
So you need to be able to prove adequacy of parking on the site.
Okay, so it's referring back to the table that we just commented on. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Anything else on 11? Page 12. The one angular parking illustration there, there's actually a number there. I think that's hard to read, but I probably should.
We're going to be cleaning those all up. That was just kind of.
Put varies in there instead of a hard number because it's going to vary depending on the angle of the parking.
Yeah, it was a placeholder.
And then in part D, it talks about approved by the town engineer. Should engineer be capitalized? Just semantics. That was all of my comments. Anything else, gentlemen?
Nothing from me.
Now, did you want to entertain a motion on this part of that right now?
That's your pleasure.
Okay. Sounds like the thought is we'll just keep going through the second one and we'll combine them. So sign code update, page 1. And I appreciate all the work that went into this. There's been a lot of really good changes here. Page 2. 3, 4, 5, 6. Under gateway sign, I just wondered if freestanding and monument should be capitalized in the first line there, since those are defined terms. Page 6, gateway sign. Freestanding and monument in the first line of that definition.
Especially because they are capitalized
okay.
later on in that same.
Chairman.
They were qualified as type of sign, and then, so it wasn't necessarily, the formal, but if you want them capitalized, that's fine.
That's,
I think my thinking was it was suggesting something similar, not specific to the definition. So once we make it specific to the definition, if we see an application that falls
okay,
potentially, or there's an argument that, no, that's not a freestanding or monument, we could say it says type. So let's stick with the gateway.
okay, that's fine.
Okay.
As long as there's a thought process there, I'm good with it. On page 7, and again, down at light emitting diode lighting and LED sign, you noted in there in parentheses, refer to digital sign regulations. I'm wondering if we just want to clarify that a little bit and say 150.099D10, just to clarify that, like you did with the other stuff. Which I thought was good.
Yeah, it would be the same in both of these.
Yes, on both of those. Yep,
And the LED.
those last two. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. And this one's just going to be me being, I don't know if nitpicky, just curious. On projecting/suspended sign, the last wording there says, or finished grade when no sidewalk exists. Should it be where? When is more time dependent versus place dependent?
Very good.
But I appreciate that language. I like the language. And the same comment on page 11 under shingle sign. Change when to where. Page 12. Page 13. I had a comment under exemptions B, holiday decorations. I thought you were being very generous in allowing them 45 days after the holiday to take them down.
Vice Chair, Commissioners, so at our last discussion, staff was directed to go do a little bit of research, and on that topic, Chandler allows seasonal decorations. However, the general consensus, the current code has 30 days, so holding 30 days would not be a change to the current code. Queen Creek allows 30 days for seasonal sales events, so not specifically what we're discussing. I did notice Gilbert and Chandler really they started to separate seasonal decorations from commercial, from signage. And that's what I've seen that happen over the years. So, it's up in the air. We felt this is really an item that would be a reactive enforcement policy if we see a problem, or if we're being made aware of somebody, abusing their location of their decorations on top of their building or something like that, to where we're starting to think, okay, they're turning on the lights still. This is causing, a distraction, and as abuse of the sign code. They're using it as more of a sign that we would enforce. So whether you do 45 days or 30 days, what we didn't want to happen is all of a sudden now we have to strictly enforce everybody in the community to remove their decorations, 30 days after. So having a little bit of that leeway, we felt would be helpful. So it's really up to the commission.
That's
I would
fine.
say any place in between 30 and 45 days.
I almost think it's self-policing, because it seems like as soon as Christmas is over, then Valentine's Day stuff goes up, and As soon as that goes out, then Mother's Day stuff goes up, or so,
It's really intended for that commercial business that is going to run with it
yeah,
for as long as they can, and now we have the teeth to enforce. So
yeah. Okay, I'm fine with it, I just thought it was pretty liberal.
what do you think, 30 or 45 days?
Based on your explanation, I'm fine giving staff that kind of leeway to work
I'll
with it.
tell you
so.
what, I would leave it as the old code was, so I can say we're not changing anything.
I concur. I, for one, would rather see it left at 30 than 45.
Is that on up and down, or just down?
It was both up and down.
Yeah, and the only thing, I raised it at the last meeting, holiday decorations. I mean, anymore Christmas, I'm already hearing Christmas music on the radio, and it's, what, the 15th of November? You know?
They started the Christmas advertising even before Halloween.
Yeah.
For crying out loud.
That's my only concern. I don't want to jeopardize a commercial establishment's ability to advertise, but I just wanted to be realistic too.
Oh, it's those decorations that we're talking about, not their other legal signage,
Right.
temporary signage, things, special sales events that they're doing for the holidays. That all is covered in a different area. This is,
Purely holiday
please get your
decorations.
decorations down. It's been 45 days since Christmas,
Yeah.
I think, or you're up a little early, so consensus, we should stick with not changing the code and leave it at 30 days. And again, we're not out making people
Yeah,
pull that down.
we've enforced under complaint basis.
I guess the question, is there any problem with it right now being 30 days?
No, I'm not aware.
Not aware of any.
Okay, I guess we can just
I would say-
leave it at 30 then if everybody's good for it. Okay, page 14. 15. 16. 17. 18. And I trust under paragraph P, where it talks about the faces of the sign and whatnot, that's going to be one of those where you're going to see figure XYZ, whenever you get it put in there, it'll be added. That's one that probably needs a figure to clarify it.
We do have that graphic defining what a wall plane is considered.
Right. I just don't see any placeholder in there for C exhibit A, B, C, or D, so. 19. 20. Under D, freestanding signs. Up to one freestanding sign is allowed for each building frontage. No business shall have more than two freestanding signs except as allowed by a comprehensive sign plan, which is capitalized, but we've removed that definition from our list of definitions. So I'm thinking if we want to leave it out of the definitions, maybe we should put in parentheses behind that C section 150.101. If we don't want to define it, just so that people understand to go there to find the comprehensive sign plan process. And then on number 2, sign height. We got a little redundant there, I think. The maximum height of any freestanding sign shall not exceed 50 feet in height for any portion. So I think you can take out that second in height because you've already talked about height. And that carries on with the next 2 sentences as well, where it says, height of any shall not exceed 10 feet in height. I think those second in heights can be taken out. So there's 3 times there in that paragraph.
And then in the last sentence too, maximum height of any freestanding sign shall not exceed 8 feet in height.
Yep. Anything else on 20? 21. 22, I had a question on paragraph J, second one from the bottom of that page, says the distance separation for digital signs shall be no less than 200 feet. I guess my concern there was property owner A comes in, he puts his digital sign up. Property owner B, who's next door, who's only 150 feet away, says, I'd like a digital sign. And we say, I'm sorry, there has to be a 200-foot spacing. So is this kind of a first in time, first in right, or do we need to? I noticed that back on, in subsection 5 on page 21, where it says, where we were talking about freestanding signs shall maintain a distance of at least 200 linear feet on the same parcel or 50 linear feet on different parcels. Do we need to have something like that for digital signs? Because it's kind of like, if you get in and get the space reserved, then your neighbors might not get digital signs. That's a question.
You know, it's a good point as far as fairness is concerned.
Right.
You could look at it two different ways, or several different ways. One is, you know, when you start putting illuminated signs like digital signs down there and putting them close together, it starts to get problematic and a potential traffic distraction trying to read them all. There is the variance process should you run into an individual property owner situation, you know, one block another dimensionally, and that way they can be looked at, you know, whether it meets the required findings of a variance, or we can just, you know, put some type of wording, you know, unless on separate individual parcels or something of that nature, or do the wording similar to the freestanding sign. It kind of depends on which direction you would like us to go.
I was thinking about this as I drove into town today and saw the Taco Bell digital sign and the Chevron digital sign next door, which are way within 200 feet of each other, so.
Violation of this new code. So I'm, Vice Chair Commissioners, I'm not familiar with the rationale when this was originally drafted by the prior group, but it does sound like we could possibly mirror the freestanding sign.
Or maybe just check with other municipalities and see what they're up to, and it just seems like there's kind of a fairness question here.
I'm wondering if, because often in larger places, you know, you'll see one big digital sign that will service 4 or 5 different businesses. And I'm wondering if there should be, or if there could be, or if there is something in other codes about the possibility of combining those digital signs so that 4 or 5 business owners can have one together, where it may be 200 feet from the farthest one, but it's going to be right in front of the nearest one.
Kind of a co-op.
Kind of a co-op situation with the sign.
Right, and I think that's the intent of the freestanding sign section, because saying if you're on the same parcel, put it together, yeah, every 200 feet, but if it's separate lots, separately owned and managed, then every 50 feet, so there's some spacing, but we'll take a look.
Okay.
But I agree that needs to, if it's single managed parcel, it needs to have one single sign.
Okay, page 23. 24. 25. 26. One comment on 26 down at the very bottom where it talks about temporary signs, and this is a section dealing with signs for residential districts. Do we need to give some guidance as to what a temporary sign for duration is in a residential district?
Okay, so this section E goes to one subdivision, so it's temporary signs in a subdivision, and A, B, and C apply. And it's temporary for the period of construction, and it's kind of specific as to what the duration is for that. This, we landed on this at the last discussion as well. So
right.
E, temporary signs allowed in residential districts need to apply, conform to item 1 subdivisions, A, B,
Just
and
on the
C.
next page.
So basically it's for the construction of,
Well, you have a subdivision sign there on the next page under.
but that's a subsection of
That's a
1
subset
under E.
Of
That's under E.
temporary
Sorry,
signs.
we got hung
Subsection
up. I
D.
got rid of the space that
Yeah.
was in between them
Oh, yeah,
the last
okay.
meeting, but yeah, that's
Okay.
all
Oh, yeah,
E
okay.
section.
I stumbled on this one the last meeting, and I stumbled again, so, okay.
You know, really, we could get, well, it's for subdivision development.
And
so-
one of the things that we usually do is when we're to this stage now is we'll go back and look at each individual page layout.
Oh, yeah,
For example, that E would be spaced over to the next page. So
Yeah,
it actually,
I was going to suggest, is it possible to insert a page break after D so that E
Yeah.
and the subsection 1 are all on the same
yeah,
page?
we'll start at the very beginning and do that throughout where it's appropriate to do so.
Well, under subsection C, I noticed also that it references the comprehensive sign plan, which we've done away with.
Lowercase, or, let me look at that.
No.
See if it's defined elsewhere in the
Yeah.
ordinance.
Yeah, and that's right down below there on 150.101 is where we talk about the requirements for that. So maybe again, just put in parentheses. Yeah, good catch.
And for that reason, I would keep them capitalized because it's a referenced heading
Right.
in this situation. And like I said, I think it might be, I've got to look at the rest of the ordinance because that's a process.
Right.
Comprehensive sign plan, so that might be contained in the design review discussion of our chapter of our development code. But if that makes sense, even that it has its own setting here, or a heading, would you prefer I just have the reference to 150.101 comprehensive sign plan required, or?
Yeah, I think we deal with, just put a parentheses behind it and say C section.
Okay.
Anything else on 27? 28? 29? 30? 31? 32?
Vice Chair, on 31, we'll make an update to D on top of page 31 there. If the structure of a nonconforming sign is changed, the height and sign area of the, I'm sorry, so it'll read, starting over, apologize, if the sign structure, and that's a defined term in our, in this code, of a nonconforming sign is changed, the
Height and sign area.
height and sign area shall not be, we'll strike of the sign, shall not be increased to exceed the height and sign area limits
And
of the
sign area will be
on
capitalized.
which is located.
Yep. Good.
So that'll be the change. And then we also capitalize in the second sentence, sign area as well. And that's it.
I think just for your own information, you'll be seeing the execution of that particular subsection potentially next week. We actually have a sign coming in front of the council under Board of Adjustment, actually in front of the Board of Adjustment for the Burger King, which is currently at 36 feet in height, and I've forgotten the square footage, but it's huge because of the two double-faced logo signs as well as the menu board. They are asking for permission to do a digital sign on there, which is not currently expressly permitted, but in doing so, we were able to enact this subsection, so they're bringing it down to 18 feet. It'll be on a monument base. That'll be faced in the same stone material that they've refaced the building on, and it's going to be quite handsome.
Very nice.
So this section works, we know that.
Good. I think page 32. And we just made it to 33. Gentlemen, any other comments or concerns as we've looked through these two? Larry, will we need to make two separate motions? Okay, so we can refer back to old business, and there's language there that we can use. Yeah, be willing to entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion that we direct staff to proceed with the citizen review process prior to conducting public hearings for Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council for the parking, loading, and unloading.
Development Code Part 7.
Yeah.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt and a second by Commissioner Simmons. All in favor? Aye. Okay, passes. And we'll entertain a second motion on Development Code Part 3, sign regulations.
I'll make the motion that we direct staff to proceed with the citizen review process prior to conducting public hearings for Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council on Development Code Part 3.
Have a second?
I will second.
Okay, again, we have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt, a second by Commissioner Simmons. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Like we're unanimous on all of this tonight. Okay, going on to presentations, future agenda items, information only. Larry?
Basically, this will be a permanent fixture on your agenda going forward to apprise you of any applications that have come in or any items that we anticipate in the future. That said, I so far have no items for December for either meeting, but things can change.
Okay. Yeah, item 8 is call to the public. Call to the public for public comment on issues within the jurisdiction of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Individual commission members may respond to criticisms made, may ask staff to review a matter raised, or may ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. However, members of the commission shall not discuss or take action on any matter during an open call to the public unless the matters are properly noticed for discussion and legal action. Okay, let's call to the public. Any comments tonight? I'll close the call to the public, seeing as there's no one there. Call to the commission, current events. Commissioners? Guess one current event is we welcome a new commissioner, Commissioner Prue.
Thank you.
Great to have him aboard to fill out our commission. Anything else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion that we adjourn this time.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt, a second by Commissioner Prue that we adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 6:46 PM.